The COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on education across the world, from the shift that we saw from face-to-face to online learning and the impact that it had on students' mental health. We were so inspired by how students, teachers, and education leaders across the world have responded to the pandemic, and we want to share those stories. My name is Lisa Koster, and you're listening to the Evolving New Now and Learning podcast series in collaboration with Arizona State University and the ShapingEDU team. On this episode, I will be speaking to Marie Rutherford from Georgian College in Ontario, Canada. Marie and I have worked together since before COVID, and I'm so excited to be speaking to her today. All right, before we get started in this conversation, Marie, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, and basically what you're doing these days?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to speak on this. My name's Marie Rutherford, and as Lisa said, I'm from Georgian College in Barrie, Ontario, Canada. For over 20 years, I was faculty in the business portfolio, business and management. And recently I've transitioned to a new role where I'm doing a lot of faculty onboarding and curriculum design and support.
Take us back to March 2020, just as the pandemic started and lockdowns were implemented across the globe. How did that impact you as an educator, and what kinds of changes did you see?
That's a great question. Initially, I think it was a shared palpable level of uncertainty. We were all navigating an environment that literally shifted overnight, or at least it seemed to. And it raised a lot of questions. What happens next? How will we manage this? How do we manage the shifting demands and priorities? Will we all survive it? Our personal narratives changed. That's the best way I could describe it. And there was almost a sense of trauma in terms of loss happening because we were so unsure of what was going to happen. And the social interactions, that all changed. So for us faculty, it was a very dramatic shift in terms of how are we going to focus on, how are we going to continue to deliver at a level that was appropriate for the educational standards? How are we going to support our students? There were so many nuances that had taken place that we weren't sure what the future held, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
Did you feel that you were prepared for that transition? And did the school provide, the skills and training and access to resources that you needed?
That there was a lot of things happening all at once, as you can imagine. In some ways, I had felt prepared. My faculty team was not entirely prepared because who could be prepared for an emergency shift to remote? In my recent background, prior to the pandemic, I had taken some learning on how to teach online, how to deliver courses, how to select different curriculum. So I felt in a way I was somewhat in a more favorable position, but there still needed to be a lot of supports. There were a lot of questions from our learners. There was a lot of, I don't know how I'm going to do this, and what tools will I use? How will it be equitable for everybody to do this in a fashion that would be acceptable, but as well as supportive? The school did offer a lot of supports available for both faculty to get their courses ready and to prepare to shift to this remote delivery. But again, it was a very short period of time, a quick turnaround. How are we going to do this in the little bit of time that we had? And it was also supporting the learners in their shift going on to remote. How were they going to, there was questions about, I don't have the technology. How else could I get access to the material? So we had to do a lot of deep thinking on synchronous deliveries or asynchronous deliveries and being flexible at how we were going to deliver our curriculum.
How did you find that the learners experience to that transition from face-to-face to online? How did they, I know you've already sort of started talking about the fact that some of them didn't have the access to what the technology that they needed. So what other sort of, experiences did you have with their transition?
Everything in everybody's life had changed. From day to day, work situations, economic, financial constraints for our learners. They may have lost job opportunities, that helped support them financially through their learning. So there were so many things. And one of the ways we looked at it was, how can we manage the workload for our learners so that they felt supported? We're still moving through the curriculum, but didn't maybe have as high a burden in terms of the number of assignments, the scope of the assignments. So that's some of the ways we adopted kind of a flexible approach to learning.
Did the school provide or offer opportunity to get technology if they need it?
Actually, they did, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because of the learners that didn't have access to technology, there was some supports available for those individuals who identified it. It was getting our students to identify and share those situations that they found themselves in and asking for that support. So some of that was a bit of a challenge, drawing that out, finding out, and having people identify. So we were able to get, for some people, the technology resources that they could have. Even the school had the Wi-Fi available in the parking lot. And I know that sounds maybe strange, but students could drive to the institution and attend classes through their, sitting in their car, accessing the Wi-Fi that maybe they didn't have the support at home to do.
So with your students, did you experience any of your students that had mental health challenges? And if so, how did you help them with if they were struggling?
I think the pandemic highlighted a lot of struggles students were experiencing, and mental health definitely was a component of that. Some of the things we noted right off the bat was coming online to learn. A lot of students, this was a new environment for them, and they felt really detached to the social aspect of the post-secondary experience. So we seen for some students, motivation declined, participation declined, and just a simple, I don't want to minimize it, but a simple withdrawal from what they were normally doing, like participating in class. You could feel the stress levels, the check-ins we had with our students. So some of them did display depressive symptoms. They even would voice that to us one-on-one. They would ask to have a meeting with their faculty and talk about how they were feeling and what they were experiencing, the not sleeping. And some of them were missing deadlines, and you'd ask to meet with them, and then the discussion surrounding mental health would come through those meetings and directing them to the support systems that the college had available. But even some of the community supports became part of our intervention as faculty to really facilitate how could we do this. And something that I found exceptionally helpful was at the start of my classes, having some check-ins and posting a variety of different images and asking my learners to choose which image represents how they're feeling today. And it would often lead into an interesting conversation. And you would know through these conversations, particular students that were struggling, and you would reach out to them at a later point and talk about and offer that supportive ear that they needed so badly.
Being flexible and, and empathizing with their situation really became a key factor. Because I still sometimes get students who they're just overwhelmed, and they say, can I have an extension? Or can I, I'm almost done this, but I need a little bit more time. So what strategies would you suggest for using empathy in and outside the classroom? You've already sort of mentioned some of them. Are there any additional ones you would like to share or suggest?
Well, I think the power of empathy is so substantial, and it's not something that can be minimized. And in this kind of extraordinary circumstance, I think if you display a positive approach, it has an impact. So making people feel more positive about the circumstances, but also from an empathetic approach, for me, it was imagining what my students were experiencing, putting myself in their position and saying, what are they feeling? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? And how are they feeling? So empathy has the word path in it. So from that, you kind of design a path forward, thinking about how can I support my learners? What can I do in terms of being flexible with deadlines, in terms of being flexible with even the curriculum in how it's presented, and also being empathetic in terms of the deadlines, the constrictions, remembering all those kinds of barriers that our learners are facing. So being more equitable in my approach was very important to me as well, in terms of supporting our students. Focusing on how people are feeling, it helps to understand what others are experiencing. Listening actively, we were talking about that supportive ear, really listening to what my learners were saying when they were talking about how they were doing. So I would ask them how they were doing, not just particularly about this course, about everything. What do they want to share? And that's where that active listening came in. And asking them open-ended questions often triggers people to talk more and open up and share what they're experiencing. And even my body language when I was doing my remote discussions, how I'm choosing my words very carefully, making sure that they're not words that would create sensitivity or concerns amongst my learner, and also withholding judgment, not being rigid and making snap decisions or determinations about why somebody is behaving a certain way. I think all of those were part and parcel of an empathetic approach.
I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, and sharing your story. Are there any last thoughts that you have that you would like to share about the experience of, that we've had in the last 2.5 years with COVID? And I mean, hopefully we're someday going to be out of it soon, but it'd be, are there anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's really important as an educator, and as I reflect on this time and this experience that I know so many other educators and learners, of course, experienced as well, is we're not going to see business as usual ever again. It's going to change how we do things, and in some real positive ways. It's made us really stop and think about how we're designing activities for our learners, how they're receiving that information. So I think we're more focused, we're more personalized in terms of our approach and our humanity. It's more person-centered, and I don't think we're ever going to remove that. I think we've learned so much from that. I'm hoping that we have. So our way forward is a little bit different now than what it was, and I think it's a good thing from a number of avenues and perspectives.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. And good luck with all of the wonderful projects you've got going on.
Thank you, Lisa.